Kia ora and welcome to Really Blind, the podcast where, since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair well-spoken days, I'm determined to prove a villain.
I'm Neve.
And I'm Sam.
And it's really exciting to have you here.
Oh my god, we go! Today, we are going to be yapping about disability and representation through the lens of a very specific Shakespeare play. Ho ho! We are going to make this a two-parter. So today I will talk about disability through the lens of Richard III, and we'll explore the history of the real person, as well as representation within the play, and then kind of use that as a jumping off point to discuss things a bit closer to home, or more real for us. Please don't rip out your headphones if you heard me say Shakespeare and want to tap out. I promise to make this conversational. Shakespeare's only boring if the person discussing him is boring, which I might be, but Neve will tell me if I am, so we're good.
At some stage, we'll be doing another episode where I will be exploring the way that blindness is portrayed in fiction, which hopefully, again, that sounds boring too, but hopefully not.
Yay. Okay. Neve,
Yes.
what do you know about Richard III?
I know it's a play
That's a great start.
by Shakespeare, and I know he is disabled, and that is pretty much all I know. I've not read the play, I've not seen the play.
Well, let's talk about it, I guess. Oh, okay. I hated that. Let's not ever say let's talk about it. So I've kind of split it into three parts. So we'll start with kind of like the real Richard III and talking about the history of who he actually was.
Yeah.
And the comparison is pretty interesting as well, hopefully. We're going to read a little bit of Shakespeare. We're going to discuss that soliloquy and break it down a little bit. And then representation as our third and last, kind of like pulling it all together.
Cool.
So I don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to go. Okay, so Richard III is one of Old Mate's best known historical plays. Shakespeare often based his plays on pre-existing myths or stories or real history. We give Shakespeare a lot of credit for words that he coined and stories that he made, but often they were actually based on pre-existing things. So this is obviously the latter, right? Like, this is based on history. So Shakespeare kind of took a lot of these ideas. Oh my god, I feel like I'm preaching to you.
I'm enjoying this. This
Really?
feels so much better than the Newlywed Game.
Shakespeare liked to take stories and inspiration from lots of different places, but he always made adjustments, and he definitely made adjustments for Richard III. So much of this play's context is reliant on background, and the way Shakespeare kind of warped him is similar to how the Tudors actually wanted Richard to be portrayed as a villain. They wanted to make him look bad because his successor, who was Henry VII, which doesn't feel like 7th, just doesn't feel to me like a real number that a royal would have been.
No.
You know, like, it's either like 6th or 8th. It's like 7th.
It should go in twos.
Yeah, but for some reason, apparently.
But then Richard III seems fine, so
I don't know why I think that, but
I agree though.
thank you. They wanted to make his successor look better because he, as far as I know, kind of like defeated Richard III, or he at least like came after him on the throne, right? So they wanted to make Henry VII look good by kind of bad-mouthing Richard, who came before him.
Sure.
So I do think an argument could be made for how Richard III was kind of a victim to the propaganda. It was spread after his death, mostly. It seemed like when he was alive, he was generally quite liked by people and his country. But his disability, in whatever form it took, was definitely used against him, especially after his death, to make Henry look better. So, like, let's just get the low-hanging fruit, right? How can we make the previous guy look bad so I look better? Let's just go for the disability.
The
Let's
easiest thing to attack.
Yeah, let's really fuck with him. I thought that was interesting too, because I've seen it something that I've experienced where it's like, let's just drop the disability in there as a reason to not hire this person or to not like this person.
Yeah.
So,
It's the easy out.
Exactly. We can all relate a little bit to Richard III.
Yeah.
Maybe. We're all kings somehow. We're all disabled kings somehow. The research that I've done, I'm just going to quote the names and what their kind of like qualifications are, which just so if anyone wants to check references, then I've got this in here and it should be pretty easy to find. So according to someone called Professor Michael Dobson, who is the director of the Shakespeare Institute. So this is him kind of like exploring the differences between the real Richard III and then Shakespeare's Richard III, which are definitely two different figures completely.
Yeah.
Apparently Richard didn't have an insanely crooked back. It wasn't straight, but he wasn't a hunchback. So a lot of these stories exaggerate him to be super hunchback. Shakespeare's play makes him limpy and he's got a weak arm and this all this kind of stuff that wasn't really necessarily true. Mm-hmm. He really wasn't that visibly disabled.
Right.
He didn't murder Henry VI, and he was actually loyal to his older brother Edward, who he was not loyal to in Shakespeare's play. The real Richard and Lady Anne, who he did not poison in real life, were actually happily married for over 12 years. It wasn't like a fleeting sort of means to an end fake romance situation like in the play. And rather than wooing his niece Elizabeth of York after Anne dies, classy, Richard actually wept apparently throughout all of Anne's funeral, who died really shortly after their 10-year-old son. So there's pain and misery there that Richard doesn't get a chance to show in the play that we think probably was actually the case. He's often remembered as bringing the Wars of the Roses to an end, which was, do you know about the Wars of the Roses?
A little.
Kind of just political chaos.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to summarise that.
Yeah.
So he was kind of remembered throughout history as actually bringing that to an end and then bringing English governance to sort of peace. It kind of started an era of peace when he took the throne. So kind of a good thing for in a lot of people's minds. Those are all the things that are different. It was true that he was only crowned after executing a bunch of people, and he did send Edward IV's 2 underage sons to the Tower of London, where they didn't come back. So that's an actual thing that happened, both in the play and in real life. So Dick's not a saint, but I mean, what fucking English king was ever a saint?
Yeah,
you know? Like,
there's, could have been much worse.
could have been much worse.
For sure.
And the play would want us to think that it was much worse.
Absolutely.
So not so bad. In terms of a little bit of who he was and what kind of happened to him, Caroline Hammond, who is an author and a scholar of Richard III, a lot of these people actually specialise in Richard III specifically.
Wow.
Like there's a whole society dedicated to basically clearing his name, myth busting and stuff. So some people really care about it, which is, I don't know, really interesting and kind of cool.
Yeah.
So Hammond talks about how early portraits of him, probably not necessarily done when he was alive, but like the earliest, show no sign of disability. He looks pretty standard. Later portraits, though, believed to have been painted to fit in with the myth or the propaganda, show uneven shoulders and a pretty evil expression. A raised shoulder in the Windsor portrait shows that under X-ray was later an addition to a painting with a normal shoulder line.
They photoshopped it.
They totally photoshopped him.
That is insane.
To make him look more disabled when the original painting didn't make him look like that at all.
Wow.
The power of propaganda, I suppose.
That is crazy, yeah.
But yeah, the smear campaign low-key worked, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
we all think of him as a sort of
As a
disabled
bad
villain,
person, yeah.
which is potentially not necessarily the case. There is mention of the unevenness of Richard's shoulders, but apparently people who observed this unevenness could never agree on which was higher. It can't have actually been that pronounced if they can't decide what shoulder it was, or, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even people who weren't a fan of him tend to speak pretty highly of his bravery and prowess in battle. So even people that maybe were not necessarily on his side or didn't love him were still like, he was pretty brave and he was bloody good on a horse. So it's not stopping him from going to war. It's not stopping him from being a good king.
Yeah, it's not significant enough that he's physically unable to go to battle.
To live.
Yeah.
And do his kingly duties.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. He's still living his life, basically. Apparently, Usain Bolt has the same condition that Richard III had. Just to give you some perspective on how debilitating it may or may not have been for him.
The fastest man alive. Is he still the fastest man alive?
I don't know. Potentially.
I feel like he might be.
I've paid no attention to sport in years, so I'd have no clue. But
do we know what the condition is?
yes. So, great segue. Before I get there, I do want to quote Sir Winston Churchill here. Wow. Getting some, wartime PM quotes in here.
Yeah.
No one in his lifetime, Richard III's lifetime, seems to have remarked these deformities, but they are now very familiar to us through Shakespeare's play. So even Churchill had some thoughts on how Richard III didn't actually seem to be as deformed as we think him to be. In 2012, his skeleton was found under a parking lot in Leicester.
Oh no.
In England.
Oh.
Deliberately, they were looking for it. They
Right.
didn't just randomly unearth the king skeleton like it was a search they were making.
Oh, Richard.
Hey man! I thought I could show you the picture of his skeleton.
I would love that. Should we link it in the description as well so that people
I guess
can
we
see
could,
it?
yeah. What are you seeing in the picture?
So it looks like he has scoliosis
Correct.
in his kind of mid to low back, which I would assume, I'm not a doctor, but I would assume that wouldn't cause a hunchback.
Correct.
It would create other issues. But yeah, the difference between his shoulders is a centimetre at most.
It doesn't seem to be obvious in the way the skeleton's being laid
And
out.
like
Yeah.
a lot of clothes, and I'm assuming kings back in those days wore like shoulder pads.
You're like nailing it. Like his stuff would have been tailored. Like
Yeah,
there's
like,
so many reasons.
It
that
would not
it's-
have been noticeable.
Yeah, exactly.
People don't always notice my lazy eye. They're certainly not noticing his slightly askew shoulders.
So the evidence, obviously, as you can see, as you just said, shows that he had scoliosis, but not kyphosis, which is the medical term for a hunchback.
Right.
Which is the stereotype about Richard III.
Sure.
He definitely didn't have a hunchback. Scoliosis is more like a wavy spine going side to side, whereas obviously a hunchback would be bent over. So that's totally not what he was dealing with. I don't want to talk about this much because I'm not a doctor. Neither of us are doctors. And I think you nailed what we needed to say there. But functionally seems to be a different kind of condition to a full-blown, untreatable progressive disability.
Yeah.
Yeah. A BBC article I read quotes Dr. Jose Perez Diaz. That's all I'm going to say for that. I'm so sorry for that pronunciation. Who I do want to say is apparently both a lecturer in drama and English in Leeds. So this person like knows what they're talking about, allegedly, but also is not a disability expert, which I want to mention. Says the discovery of Richard III's body demonstrated unequivocally that he was indeed severely disabled. His pronounced scoliosis must have affected his mobility and physical posture quite considerably. Still, he was the last English king to die on the battlefield, not just commanding his troops, but physically engaged in combat. This really tells us of a person who was determined to overcome his disability in pursuit of his military and political career. What are your thoughts on that quote?
So his use in maybe the second sentence of this must have affected him, I think proves that this person doesn't really have any sort of experience with disability.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, yes, scoliosis can have a large effect on you, but I think the fact that he was going out and doing battle and being a king proves that it wasn't affecting him that significantly, because back in those days there were no supports for disability. So I don't think it reflects his determination to overcome his disability, but I think it shows that he was not severely disabled.
I agree. This quote sits weird with me, and it feels like it's told from an abled person who
For
doesn't, because it's like, oh, he was disabled, but he overcame his struggles. Like the idea of overcoming disability, the idea that disability is something to be fixed or healed or to like power through and
You
deserve
have to
pity for.
Prove that you can do everything in spite of your disability. Yeah, that is a very able-minded perspective,
Yeah.
I think. And yeah, I immediately don't like this doctor. I'm sorry. I'm sure he's a lovely person.
These different opinions are interesting to me, right? Because Dobson and Hammond, who are both reputable Shakespeare scholars who specialise specifically in Richard III, state it wasn't that bad, and they also base that on historical recounts of him. But Diaz, who's also a Shakespeare scholar, calls him a Shakespeare scholar calls him severely disabled. So I don't know, it seems like Diaz kind of, I don't know. It's just an interesting, different perspective. Some people do say that he was fucked, basically, and overcame his disability. I don't think that's the conversation that we're having here. That
sure.
perspective does seem to me to just be a little bit out of touch with the people that have specialised in Richard III and also people that have lived disability. Oh my gosh. Okay, so if we're getting a little bit more scientific here, Leicester was where he was found, right? Under someone's car park. Jeez, imagine being that person. The page on the University of Leicester website talks about how, I'm going to quote directly here, reconstructing Richard III's spine from CT scans, I love science, how cool is that, shows that the curve was well balanced with an angle in the range of 70 to 90 degrees. Today, this is considered a large curvature, and many with the condition, like kind of in this range, would have surgery to stabilise it. However, the physical disfigurement from Richard's scoliosis was probably slight. His torso, this is what you were observing, his torso would have been short relative to the length of his limbs and his right shoulder a little higher than the left. However, a good tailor and custom-made armour could have minimised the visual impact of this. A curve of 70 to 90 degrees would not have caused impaired exercise tolerance from reduced lung capacity, and there is no evidence that Richard would have walked with an overt limp because his leg bones are symmetrical and well formed.
Yeah, his hips are completely straight.
That's science. And I liked that there wasn't a specific author for that, but it's the university website, which means they have a whole bunch of people to consult from different faculties.
And it will have been peer reviewed if it's being published.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So And I don't know, I found that really, I loved how specific that was. I loved how anti-ableist that was. It was like, here are the facts. Here's how it would have affected him. It lines up with everything else, basically. So,
Yeah.
I think the conclusion might be that his condition would still have affected him, but not necessarily debilitated him, and would not have been as visually evident as the play or the propaganda paintings might kind of seem.
Yeah.
To kind of sum it up, I have this quote from a Harvard teacher called Jeffrey R. Wilson, who quotes, "There's no record of anyone during Richard's lifetime suggesting that his disability was socially or politically disqualifying." He was the king. At one point, he was I think the richest landowner in England. Like, he's fine, you know? I mean, obviously, sorry, I mean, we're fine. Disability fucking sucks, but he's still slaying, essentially, you know?
Yeah. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago where if he was truly profoundly disabled, he probably wouldn't have been the king.
Oh, no.
So, context clues?
Exactly.
Maybe?
Exactly. That is us kind of talking about the real Richard III, where the character started from. I thought we could read a little bit of Shakespeare now. Just a little bit. Just the first soliloquy and just a little bit of that. I want to give you maybe like a I said one sentence plot summary, but there's about 3 there. So we have a sort of 3 sentence plot summary here, just so you get an idea of what happens. Basically, Richard is determined to become king, so tries to fuck a widow at her father-in-law's funeral, kills his brother who loves him dearly, locks his nephews in the Tower of London, and declares himself king, before being visited by the ghosts of his victims and killed in battle. That's all I'm going to say. We're keeping this short and sharp here.
Right.
My kingdom for a horse might be one you've heard. That's like one of Shakespeare's famous lines, which for context, he says quite a few times just before his death. Generally, it's kind of funny, like it's often parodied. People obviously interpret it a million different ways because it's Shakespeare, and we all decide how we want to read Shakespeare. Sometimes it's interpreted to mean that the loss of his horse has lost him the kingdom, like his horse ran away or fell off the horse or whatever, and that means he's now lost his kingdom, or that he's calling for a new horse to continue fighting. I actually think it's funnier without context. I like that it's nonsensical.
Yeah.
In terms of how he is seen or portrayed both by other people and himself, we have Lady Anne and Queen Elizabeth call him different things. A diffused infection of a man, hedgehog, and bottled spider, which I quite like.
We love bottled spider.
Slay, right? And also foul bunch-backed toad. All of which I'm sure I've sent Jesse in a Snapchat this year.
Bottled spider is one that he absolutely loves.
It's a goodie, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's been my favourite one.
I like it.
Bottled spider.
For context, Jesse bought me 100 Shakespearean insults for Christmas, and so I've been sending him one insult every single day.
The present came with homework for Sam.
So I want to analyse just his soliloquy, which opens the play. Act 1, Scene 1. It begins, "Now was the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by the son of York." So that is another line that you might hear a lot.
I've definitely heard that. Yeah,
that's where it comes from, and that's how the play opens. I just want to break down the lines where he talks implicitly about his disability, because I think this is interesting and I love how disturbing it is. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too.
Yeah.
So we're just doing Act 1, Scene 1, lines 14 to 31. I'm nervous. I'm really nervous. "But I, that am not shaped for sportive tricks, nor made to court an amorous looking-glass, I, that am rudely stamped and want love's majesty to strut before a wanton ambling nymph. I, that am curtailed of this fair proportion, cheated of feature by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time, into this breathing world scarce half made up, and that so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why I, in this weak piping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time, unless to spy my shadow in the sun and descant on mine own deformity. And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain and hate the idle pleasures of these days." Oh, Shakespeare, my man. Anything standing out to you from that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was a mishmash of old-timey words, so I'm struggling to remember them. But yeah, definitely, I guess, sad boy in a way that I really understand, of like, I'm alone in this and I'm a burden and unwanted. But it felt like there was a little bit of anger in there as well. So it definitely, I felt like I could relate to it, which was really weird because I've never felt like that about a piece of Shakespeare's writing.
Ah, that is exactly what I want to hear. We love relating to random shit that we read. That's really exciting.
I've never related to any Shakespeare, so that's my little drama bug inside me is quite happy.
I was not expecting you to relate to that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, just
Okay.
like the vibe of it, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm relating to. Also, I feel like he's focusing quite a bit on how sexually unappealing he is.
Totally.
Which I think is a really interesting focus as a man with a disability, because I don't know, that's definitely something I've considered. I can't relate to that side of it as much, but I definitely can, because disabilities in my brain are not sexy. My disability is not sexy. I think it's an interesting perspective. I like it.
When this was initially a pop culture podcast we were going to do today, the idea of masculinity and disability, interesting. Me Before You. Have you seen that?
No.
Sam Claflin becomes a quadriplegic. And I read this thesis that was like breaking down the relationship between hegemonic masculinity and disability and how they can't exist in the same space. And so it's interesting that you picked up on the masculine sexuality.
See, that's really interesting, because that's just reminded me that I was told a lot when I first went blind when I was 5. A lot of fully grown adults would say to me, oh, it's okay that you're blind because you're pretty.
We've had this conversation so many times, and I think we should do a podcast on disability and beauty.
For
because
sure.
there's so much to talk about there.
But yeah, I think while I wholeheartedly disagree with adults saying that to a young child, I think they had a point in that me being pretty helps with other people's perception of my disability, whereas I think trying to be masculine and attractive while having a physical disability would be really difficult.
Totally, because disability is often seen as pitiful and emasculating. So that must be a really hard line to walk that I had never thought about before looking into it. So you're right. The idea that like being conventionally attractive gives us a kind of pass, it's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's totally what this is about. And especially sex, because Shakespeare and sex, he loved a good dick joke, like Shakespeare. Well, also, he was writing for the upper classes, but he was also writing for the lower classes. Yeah. Anyone could go to the Globe and watch his stuff. So he wanted to have the sort of sophisticated, intelligent, romantic aspects for people that might have been of a higher class, but then just have the dick jokes for people that just were there to have a laugh and get drunk. Yeah. So, makes sense.
Fantastic.
You're totally right. So, sportive, but I that I'm not shaped for sportive tricks. Sportive is sexual. So you literally nailed it from the first thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He's not shaped for missionary or doggy. He's not shaped for sportive tricks.
Right.
He's not there to have sex.
Okay.
Yeah. He's not made to court an amorous looking glass. Obviously, he doesn't like looking in the mirror. Maybe he sees something that he doesn't feel reflects him inside, or he's disturbed by what he sees. No one likes looking at him, essentially. Fuck the mirrors. I that am rudely stamped and want love's majesty. I haven't seen this talked about. I think that means that he did want love at some point. The majesty of love. He wanted to experience it. That's something that maybe he has a desire for, but now feels he can't get because of who he is and what he looks like.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, right. Wanton ambling nymph. So wanton ambling, to quote my Oxford Shakespeare edition, means sexy walk. So a wanton...
See, that is not what I would imagine when I think of wanton, for sure.
Yeah, no, a lot of these words in Shakespeare's plays mean something different then than they do now because language changes. So wanton, I think, is more explicit then than it would be now for us.
Right, see, I always thought of wanton as meaning kind of somber.
So it means sexy. So a sexy little nymph that's like walking with her little thighs out. I don't know.
Right.
So he wants to strut before a sexy nymph, but can't because she'll laugh at him, basically.
Right.
I that am curtailed of this fair proportion, curtailed meaning docked as in a dog's tail. I think we can read that in a few different ways, right? Like, it could be metaphorical, he's cut from his full potential, or it could be another Shakespeare dick reference where he feels emasculated or like he's been, what's the word when you get your dick cut off? Starts with C. Castrated. He feels emasculated or like he's been castrated by his lot in life.
Yeah. I don't know, this whole soliloquy feels very literal to me.
It does have that feeling, eh?
Yeah.
So that could be it too. Cheated of feature by dissembling nature. So dissembling could apparently mean he expected to look better than he does, but we could also read it as disassembling, which could then be the idea that he's sort of has come together in a not quite right way. Like I'm thinking like Mr. Potato Head, like, all his parts don't really fit together or something kind of like that.
Yeah.
Deformed, unfinished, sent before my time. A lot of this play conflates disability with deformity, which we know is a generalization because a lot of the battles we're fighting now is that not all disabilities are visible. Ours aren't super visible to a lot of people. And we know there's a large chance that Richard's condition actually wasn't visible either. So it's like...
it doesn't even apply here.
Works against itself, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion of time in this sequence too. So sent before my time, he's premature, is what he's saying there. Like, didn't develop fully.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And like...
Okay. So we didn't finish cooking, essentially.
That's what he's saying there. And also unfinished. So, A, that supports the kind of premature theory, but also... unfinished as in he hasn't become all that he can become yet. He can, he still has time to shape himself into whatever.
Right.
I will skip down to so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Dogs are barking at him because he's so ugly. Poor guy. Horrible. I also like weak piping. Why I, in this weak piping time of peace, alludes allegedly to like feeble little baby chicks. Like weak piping. Why I, in this weak piping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time. So maybe the idea that, like, this idea of fragility and feebleness and... That was a fascinating connection there, yeah. We have time come up again. Kind of this idea that I think he's stressing about time, feeling like he's running out of time. Time did him real dirty, so he's pissed about time. It's the whole thing. He doesn't want to pass away the time unless he's spying on his shadow to descant on his own deformity. So... that's saying, obviously, his hunchback is so visible that he can see it in his shadow. Again, we know not true, but we're getting a quite monstrous vision of Richard and who he is here. Lastly, this is the cringy line that I opened with. Since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I'm determined to prove a villain and hate the idle pleasures of these days. So here... he's made his choice, right? The decision has been made. He's given up on love, even though maybe he wanted it at some point. We see that earlier on. And has become the villain that society and dogs have decided that he is. He's fulfilling his fate. Here is like where I would argue that he has a choice. I think an effective portrayal of him on stage would be to feel initially torn as an audience member. We hear his story. We feel sorry for him. We might in some ways understand where he's coming from, like you did. And then we see him kind of decide to do the bad thing, but be torn about it. And I think as the play goes on, he gets worse and worse. And by the end, you're like, I have no pity for you, bro. But I do think this is where I wanted to tie this back to us. We see Richard make the choice that I know people with disabilities and trauma choose. The choice to be a bad person is a choice that some people make because they feel that's their lot in life. And they don't owe the world anything. I feel like criminals, I know nothing about criminology, but like people that do really bad things, I think often have trauma or
it's
conditions.
Always rooted in trauma, for sure.
In some way, right?
Yeah,
so
100%.
Here are the choices I think we have if we have shit things happen in our lives, which we all do, and sometimes that's disability. 1, to do nothing and die in our beds. Totally an option. One I've considered, one I'm sure you've considered.
Yeah.
2, to be horrible, wanky Richard III-esque dicks. Also an option. We see it happening here in our play. Or 3, to get up each day and just fucking try. I think those are the options that we have given to us.
Yeah.
And I think that's a choice that we make. We can't control what happens to us. We can control what we do with it. It can be shit and we feel horrible and sorry for ourselves and self-pitying and that's fine. That's going to happen. But I think it's a real choice to stay stuck in that shitty space and then to, I don't know, like kill people and send your nephews to a tower.
Yeah, I think it honestly takes more, it could potentially take more effort to stay in that negative, I am the villain mindset. Because I think like those last 2 options can blur together at times. But like, yeah, and especially with having a disability, like I certainly wouldn't have the energy to be a villain every day. I'm like just trying to see, you know? Like,
I 100% agree. I think it's harder to be a bad person than a nice person.
For sure. Like I do say thank you sometimes when people move out of my way when I'm walking with my cane because
it's nice.
It fills my cup.
On the days when you have energy to do that.
Yeah. I would agree with those 3 options. And yeah, like we said, it's not a binary. You're going to fluctuate in and out of all of them. But like, yeah, obviously for the sake of a play, that would be boring to watch a wishy-washy main character.
Totally.
But yeah, I do like the idea that he kind of had just been in the camp of just getting up every day and trying, and he just kept getting pushed down further and further, which again kind of falls in on itself because he's the king. So like, is your life really that bad?
And also what you're saying about how the play opens with him making that decision, which is obviously what I've just been talking to you about, but I haven't thought about it like that. His older brother thinks that Richard loves him. So when Richard kills him, he's like, yo, what the fuck? Well, Richard's cronies kill him, but there's an element of shock because Ed was like, I didn't know that he didn't like me. So there's always a chance that they did have a relationship beforehand.
Yeah.
And now Richard's been like, right, done. It's time.
Yeah, and I think he would have made that decision quietly, for sure. He wouldn't have shared that.
And to be fair, he wasn't king when the play opened. The play is about him pursuing being a king, so maybe he feels like being a king is going to then validate him.
I did not realise that. So yeah, the being trodden down sort of feeling would maybe apply. I don't know, that feeling of like, you have to kind of pick a specific lane if you want to get ahead becomes even more highlighted when you have a disability. So I get it.
Yeah.
I understand where he's coming from, which I guess is the point, right?
Yeah, but I also think not everyone would necessarily.
No, I don't think I think different people in the audience would feel differently, for sure.
I just think it's obviously it's super theatrical because of what it is.
Shakespeare.
And it's Shakespeare and it's theatre. But I've always thought this connection that he has with a disability and how that acts as a catalyst for this play. That Shakespeare made this his catalyst and grossly exaggerated who he was based on propaganda.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting as well.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it too, because you're right. That is kind of the main character in the story is his disability.
Oh, I like that a lot from you. Very good. Wow.
Yeah, intellectual.
Third part is representation, because there is many thoughts on this, obviously. The first thing I thought I wanted to mention is that Game of Thrones is loosely based on the Wars of the Roses.
Oh.
Have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yeah, I've seen the first 4 seasons, I think.
More than me, I've seen the first 2.
I watched The Red Wedding and then I didn't want to keep watching it anymore.
Oh, okay. I think I need to rewatch. I'm being forced to read the books.
Oh my goodness.
Sean is very committed that I read them.
Okay.
Tyrion Lannister, who's played by Peter Dinklage, is allegedly based on Richard III. Or he's at least often compared to Richard III.
Same sort of vibe.
Same sort of vibe. Same sort of like, I look this way, so I struggle kind of idea.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting just to mention to start us off. Because then we are seeing an actor with a disability portraying a debatably also disabled character. So Hannah Simpson, who is a drama lecturer at Edinburgh University, explored the idea of disabled actors playing disabled parts. And her piece was talking about this play specifically. So she used the word cripping up. Have you heard that before?
I don't think so.
Right? So apparently recent years have seen increased resistance to cripping up, which is a word I haven't heard of, but it means non-disabled actors mimic impairment on stage or on screen. Cripping up. Well, that's not a good face.
I don't think I'd feel comfortable saying cripping at any point.
Strange, right?
Yeah.
I don't know who coined it, but
I'm assuming it's coming from crippled.
Yeah.
Which we're not really using that term anymore.
No.
Interesting. But I think what it's talking about, it seems like an okay phrase because it's kind of like, yeah, you're pretending to be disabled for money, essentially, is what you're doing.
I quite like it in some ways. I'm like, yeah, it kind of sucks.
It's kind of a shit thing you're doing, and so it should have a bit of a shit name that a non-disabled person would be really uncomfortable with. It should make those non-disabled people uncomfortable, and I think it would.
I think so.
Okay, yep, I'm on board, Hannah.
Yeah, Hannah Simpson, come through.
Hannah Simpson, we love.
So Richard III's been performed by plenty of non-disabled actors, obviously, including Richard Burbage and Laurence Olivier. Are you familiar with Laurence Olivier? Yeah, that famous guy last century who did Shakespeare in every possible form, essentially. Yeah. He also played Othello in just straight up blackface. Othello, who is a famously black character.
Yes, I did know that.
Yeah. So
right.
We're really not representing minorities. It's not a strong suit for Laurence
No.
Olivier. No. But, you know, we're setting that as sort of a baseline for Richard.
This is the tempo.
I guess we also need to put into context that, like, old Hollywood, blackface was way too common.
Yeah.
Judy Garland did it. It's absolutely inexcusable.
Yes.
But common then.
Yeah.
It's very disturbing seeing the images, though.
Awful, eh?
Horrible. I also found, this is a side note, this isn't necessarily a talking point,
Yeah.
but Kevin Spacey also played him, which I really wanted to mention, just because, like, a man accused of sexual misconduct playing a disabled character, I just wanted to drop it in there, because it just...
no.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
It just sit around with me. The allegations, apparently, like, I think something like 20 or 22 of them took place during his tenure at the Old Vic, which is when he did Richard III. I just wanted to drop that in there.
Right.
Do with that information what you will.
I do have a question.
Go.
I don't know if you're probably gonna answer this at some point anyway. Are they just like doing a hunchback? I can't remember what the word you used, the medical term for a hunchback.
I think it's kyphosis.
Kyphosis. Yeah. That, it's not just like slouching your shoulders. You do have like a protruding spine. And you can't just act that.
Yeah.
So are they adding like padding or something?
From memory, the images I saw of Spacey may have been hunchback. I might actually research live. So he did him with a crutch and a wonky shoulder. Now that's how he's usually played. So
It's like comedic.
Yep. And the production that I went to like a month or two ago was a crutch and a limp and a silly little arm.
Like that, a silly little arm.
Yeah, because he talks about his limp arm at some point in the play as well.
Oh, that for some reason, I don't like that. That is... also, just looking at a photo of Kevin Spacey,
Uncomfortable.
awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way that's done is like, because it's a tragedy, isn't it? The play.
Oh yeah.
That does not fit a tragedy in the slightest, and it does feel like he's just the butt of the joke, because the way Kevin Spacey was standing there was ridiculous.
Why does he have sunglasses on?
Does he?
Yeah. Yeah, so he's got a walking stick, sort of a leg brace situation. Is holding one arm limply and has a huge shoulder.
I don't want to link to a photo of Kevin Spacey, but I'd implore you to Google Kevin Spacey as
Richard III.
Richard III.
Yeah. We were talking before about how Benedict Cumberbatch had a CGI hump. So there's different ways that he's portrayed disabled, but hunchback or limp arm, there's always a limp in one leg.
Yeah. To come back to your first topic, I think this just proves that like he definitely wasn't physically impaired because no one can decide how to play him. But that also speaks to how little non-disabled people think about disability.
Totally.
Because an actor's just like, oh, disabled. Let me just contort my body in the most ridiculous way ever. Mm-hmm. And that's disabled.
Also, playing disabled when you're not disabled, hard.
Yeah.
You know how I know that? Because this guy that played him in the production I went to see just kept sort of waving his crutch around, walking normally in between the limps. I'm like, wow, wish.
He's not putting any weight on his
Not putting
mobility
any weight.
aid at all.
Sort of started running a few times. Like, girl, I haven't run since I was 12. So, as well as a lot of these representations being problematic, is a diplomatic way to say that. We have seen some inclusive ones as well. This one's interesting. So actress Kate Mulvaney, who I'm not super familiar with, but is quite famous, whose spine is curved as a result of childhood chemotherapy, so she does have a condition similar to Richard's, performed as a gender-swapped Richard with Bell Shakespeare in Sydney.
I love that.
I love it too, but isn't it funny that we're playing around with gender norms, but the disability portrayal is honest, so we're happy to flick a gender norm, but we're not happy to flick the disability representation.
The gender norms thing is fine for me because it used to just be all men who performed Shakespeare, so that gender should never come into casting a Shakespeare play, in my mind.
100%. And also Shakespeare loved to fuck around with gender. As You Like It, there's like 4 different layers of gender playing with Rosalind.
Yeah, like gender just is, everyone is plain in my mind when they're being, it should never be like, oh, Richard III is a man. No, Richard III is a person and will cast whoever is best for it. The reason I'm not comfortable with the flip-flopping with disability is because the actor is never going to understand and never going to be able to do a really good portrayal, first of all. So it's just going to be, the performance is going to be slightly worse, I'll say it. But also, there are disabled people who want to act that will struggle to get roles that are non-disabled. I think a section of the performing arts should be reserved for people with disabilities.
Love that. And what you were saying about how much more effective is the performance if the person's actually fucking disabled. They've talked about productions of Richard III where the character actually has a visible impairment.
Mm-hmm.
So effective when he drops that cape. Oh,
Yeah,
you're so right. So
girl.
we're coming back into you're segueing me perfectly into my next point.
I
You're
know what she's
slaying
going
it.
to say.
So good. So actor Daniel Monks portrayed Richard in a version of the play and is quoted saying, "As a disabled person, I experience ableism daily. It's a worthy, important topic to explore on our stages, but when it's done without us, it feels like our oppression is being framed as merely entertainment."
Yes!
Which is so beautifully worded.
Oh, it does feel like oppression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exclusion.
it's disability is being used for entertainment and for financial benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so financial benefit, my next point.
Oh my god.
Crazy. The Globe released a social media statement after this Richard III portrayal conversation,
Yeah.
defending their casting of an abled actor in a disabled role, saying that although they, to quote, recognise the barriers to access in our industry and are working hard to address that, they also believe that all artists should have the right to play all parts in these plays. Money, right? So I said this really puts a bad taste in my mouth, but if we scale down the romanticism of Shakespeare and history, because my god, when you go into the Globe in London, it's like, it's not the exact same spot where the initial Globe was because fires. Let's put a cannon backstage and then let it off and not think that the whole thing's going to burn down made of straw. Anyway,
You don't understand things.
but beautiful, amazing, historical. My experience there was crazy. We had a staff member take us to see where the wood grain somewhere in a corridor looks like William Shakespeare's face. Like, it was such a magical fucking experience.
Yeah.
Scale that back, they're a business that wants to make money. And that's what that statement says to me.
We're all operating under capitalism.
And apparently at the same level as disabled and able people, which is so insane because disabled people are so much more targeted by capitalism.
Yeah. I have thoughts.
Yeah,
I need
share.
to put them together. And I want to dance around this carefully because, like we were talking about earlier, last century blackface in Hollywood was everywhere. That feels like the defense a producer would have used back then. And I'm not comparing this to blackface.
Yeah.
At all.
Different conversation.
Completely different conversation. I am not qualified to comment on it at all, and I'm not.
When you frame it that way, it does show up differently, doesn't it? People obviously have things to say about this. Sam Brewer, who is a blind actor, slay, and co-founder of disability-led theatre company Floorboard, which is a double slay. Where was he when we did the Crucible for our production?
Oh my gosh,
So-
it could have been accessible.
Sounds like a legend, right? Doing great things. Rejects this statement,
Yep.
saying, there's this idea that everyone should be allowed to tell any story. Well, disabled people aren't allowed to tell any story other than their own, and now you've taken this one away from us. So, when a disabled character or a disabled story is taken away from us, it's like, well, great. There's one other thing that we don't have, and we're being further closed off from this industry. So the day when that becomes more equal and the pendulum swings back to the middle and everyone's able to play every role, then yes, go for your bloody life. But until then, sorry, no, it's not okay.
No, and that's like what I was saying before. They don't want a blind person to play a character who isn't blind. I've experienced that firsthand. What, you're going to give the part of a disabled character to someone who isn't disabled? It's fucked.
Exactly.
Fuck off. I don't agree with... I dislike the Globe statement immensely.
Really, it made me really sad to read that because
Yeah.
it does feel like a very inclusive space. Like Shakespeare, there's so much argument to be made for Shakespeare's plays being super inclusive and
And I think they are.
able to do so much with them. And
But that is someone who likes their job at the Globe because they're a theatre kid who's making a lot of money now, which doesn't usually happen.
exactly, because it's an art space, so they're already struggling, right?
And they're not disabled and they don't get it. So they should shut the fuck up.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I also really liked this to bring it back to Richard III. Stephen Bailey, who is neurodivergent and an artistic lead of a disability-centric theatre company. Apparently there's everywhere in the UK. Where are they over here? Jesus Christ.
Should we start a theatre company?
Podcast, then theatre company. Stay tuned.
God. Yeah, we're a bit busy.
Stay tuned. He says, if we are debating Richard III, we're debating the bare minimum. This is the most obviously textually disabled character. We're stuck debating whether we can play the most iconic disabled character in the literary canon. That's really tiring. It all comes back. This conversation about representation and theatre and disability and capitalism and everything comes back to Richard III being like, if we're debating the most disabled fucking character in the canon, and if that should be played by an able person, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah.
So wild.
It really is giving, like, I don't know, able-bodied actors saying they only got the part because they are disabled, not because they're better than me, which I just don't think is ever the case, and you're just not the person for the role.
I can't accept that a disabled person might be better at me than something, or deserve the role more than me, or be a better fit for this show, because they're disabled. So how can anyone...
They couldn't be better than me, they're disabled.
Lower than me on the socioeconomic scale. You're telling me they're better than me at what I do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right.
Is that also old-fashioned, like when black women achieve things and then men are like, no, I discovered that first. Let's put my name on that thing. Because, like, a woman, let alone a black woman, could surely have not done this before me. Just this kind of disbelief that someone who's trans or someone who's disabled or someone who's black or someone who's a woman can't do the same things that
a white man can. Capitalism.
I found a response to Simpson's article, which was basically everything we just talked about for this section was all from that article, by someone named Edie Mae Bladell, which I really want to mention, who says, I have a severe scoliosis and was born on the day Richard III was killed 493 years later, so I've always felt an affinity with him. Interesting. Yet I have no problem with a non-disabled actor playing him. It does not offend me at all. I don't get this idea that you can only play him if you have lived experience. My thoughts were, I disagree, but their opinion is still super valid, and a reminder to anyone listening that what you hear us talk about is only us and our perspectives. We don't want to talk about our communities in general or make generalizations. Like, this is how we feel, and someone who probably has much more of a right to an opinion than we do on Richard III is like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
So
I think it's also important. That's kind of reminded me there's a TV series that I really like. One of the main characters is a wheelchair user, and the actor is not a wheelchair user. When I found that out, my initial reaction was to be really angry, and I looked into it further, and the casting director spoke about how they auditioned lots of people, and some of those people were wheelchair users, some of them weren't, but ultimately they cast the man that they did because he was just the right person for the part, and that made me feel a little bit better. But I think because I really like the show and I really like the actor, and I think he did a really good job, but I still think that part should have gone to someone who is a wheelchair user.
This conversation is also the pool is smaller, picking disabled actors.
For sure.
So that's an interesting point as well.
And it's hard because I want to see more disability represented in media, and sometimes that's going to mean that a non-disabled person is going to play a disabled person. But I think it would be more worth having 10, 20, 30 years of disabled people only being portrayed by disabled people and the acting being slightly poorer until we increase that demand. The pool gets bigger and suddenly it's sorted. Let's just have a period of slightly worse acting because there are less actors.
Interesting.
I think that's just the way things need to go, and I don't think it would really come as that much of a cost to anyone.
Yeah.
But no one wants that because that would make less money.
Yeah. And because they would feel like they're picking from less talent. It always feels like disability representation is we take what we can get. There was one actress in a wheelchair in Barbie for the dance scene for a second. Me in the cinema, so excited. Me later, I'm grateful for it. And it was lovely because it was the first time I'd seen it. It was really exciting to see someone in a chair on the big screen. But then I was like, shit, that gets me excited. That I get one actress with a non-speaking part who gets a couple of seconds of choreography in a Hollywood film.
Could have cast her as the main character.
Even a fucking character with some damn lines, you know?
Nothing's
Like,
stopping them from doing that.
grateful for what we get, but also frustrated that it's not more, is the current line I'm walking with representation.
It's still giving virtue signaling a lot of the time for me. Like, look, we did it. We're inclusive.
Well,
this was really, really interesting. Thank you for doing all of that research.
it was so exciting.
I really enjoyed learning about this, and it's so interesting, and I'm just going to go away and continue thinking about it for the rest of the day.
If I was going to summarise this in a few bullet points, because this won't be an hour and a half long, but we are an hour 24 minutes. I have said, Richard is a horrifying villain in Shakespeare's play where he murders and flirts and locks kids in towers. We can absolutely hate his fictional self for his murderous, cantankerous, thank you, non-consensual actions when we're sitting in the stands, but the real Richard III was a lot more nuanced than Shakespeare's version and probably less evil, or at least no more evil than other royal monarchs of history. Richard III kind of fell victim to how history and Shakespeare has portrayed him, which is something to keep in mind. And I think that speaks to disabled experience in general, even if it was posthumously. And we can talk for days about our feelings on disability representation, but for me, when I see a disabled actor playing a disabled character, it feels like a fucking victory. It's another conversation to dive into how they are often villainized or pitied or portrayed, but that's how I'd summarize it. A victory and a starting point.
Again, thank you for all the work you've done on this. I think this was a really interesting conversation. I've absolutely loved having this conversation with you. This was great. I just got to relax and learn stuff today.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, when's the next one, honestly? Awesome. Well, thank you for listening. Really hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Go and follow us on Instagram at WheelieBlind, and we will be back with another episode very soon.
And thank goodness that time you can hear Neve talk for the entire podcast. So
Yeah.
if you hated my voice, which I certainly do, we get a break next time.
It's going to be me.
Hell yeah. Ooh, we love you, bye!
We love you.